All right, we are recording. So hi, Dr. Posey. Thank you so much for doing this for me on the day before Thanksgiving. Wanted to run through the questions that actually you wrote for the Education and Philosophy course. And this is kind of in relation to our learning of progressivism, constructivism, and essentialism. So just jumping in, what would be the optimum learning situation for learning? I think that's how you had written it.
Not very well written.
What would be the optimum situation for learning is I think what
Yeah.
makes a little more sense.
Um, well, I think first it would be that the teacher would be invested in students' lives and would know the students
Hmm.
and know sort of their idiosyncrasies and who is like a person that gives up quickly versus who is somebody that can work their way through and muddle through stuff. Yeah, their temperament. If their personality is um, timid and shy versus somebody that's very outgoing, I think it's really important to know that because you need to bring out the kids that are timid and shy, and you need to keep a lid on the kids that are more vocal and also sort of their backgrounds about what kind of homes they come from. Are they from a any kind of abusive kind of thing or some struggles they might have or they live in a great house with family, mom and dad and all those sort of background things. So I think that's first to me because then you can tailor what you have them do um, to that individual kid, um, and treat them, like somebody that's timid and shy, you probably will want to spend more time with them while they're doing their work or while you're teaching them, have them closer by you and, more be more supportive than some other kids would need. But then on the other side of it too, I really think that you don't learn anything until you really can make it your own.
Hmm.
That would be sort of the transfer of learning idea, that, and it comes out of constructivism that, if you don't have any experience with what you're learning, it's going to be foreign to you. It's harder to grasp it.
Hmm.
So also as a teacher, then you have to know if you're on a certain concept, have kids had experience with this? I mean, are they going to be able to connect it to their lives and connect it to their reality and then also can they explain it to you in a variety of ways, instead of just answering something on a test, can they explain to you like how something works or how you see it in the world or that kind of thing. So um, yeah, I would always focus on connecting learning experiences to real world situations as much as possible.
Okay, so that would be sort of a very progressivism approach, right?
Yeah, well, that would go into
The
constructive.
connection. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably a mixture of progressive. The whole first part of what I told you would be progressivism, and
Hmm.
the second part more is how do you construct your knowledge? Well, I mean, if you have no prior experience with something, it's going to be harder for you than if you had some kind of prior experience. So if you're teaching something that you realize the kids have no connection with, you have to give them that connection, So
Right. Right. Okay. And I think you kind of touched on the second question. But that's, what would the teacher be doing in that situation? So I think you sort of mentioned connecting with the kids and trying to, understand their backgrounds. But
and setting up activities
mhm,
that get them to that point, right? I was never ever much on using books and workbooks and things like dittos, handouts and that kind of stuff.
mhm,
Mine was always more making things and building things and constructing things, right?
mhm,
And then through that, teaching what they needed to know. So it was more of an active process.
Hmm.
Because I think that's the other thing too. You know what it's like when you've been in classrooms your whole life where you just sat and listened, and you probably handled that okay because you're in a master's program or whatever now, but the average kid doesn't handle that very well. So they need to
Hmm.
be, need to be actively engaged.
Makes sense. That's a good transition then to the next question is, what would the students be doing in that situation? I think you just kind of answered it a little bit already.
Yeah, I think that students would be working on projects or presentations or um, things that show their understanding of concepts, while you're pulling kids aside, to talk to them and, sort of interview them about the concept and see what their knowledge is.
Hmm.
Um, like I can remember when I was teaching fifth grade, we'd be reading some novel for literature, for the reading class. And in one question, I could ask, like, tell me what chapter three is about, and if they could tell me, then they had to go back and read it again, right? So
Right.
um, more of a check-in time with the students versus I never gave like tests and things like that. It was more them with me one-on-one, and I would check for their understanding.
Hmm. So as kind of a side note, I was curious about, you know, it sounds like the style of teaching that you did enabled you to like pull students aside, right? If you were in like a essential more essentialism focused or like a lecture and students listen, you don't really have the opportunity to do that, right? I
Right.
mean, okay,
Right. Well, and the difference between the essentialists is they wouldn't believe that's the best way to go.
right.
They would believe that by them, being able to take a test or whatever on their own, that's when they demonstrate their true knowledge. But,
Hmm.
I always felt like, for example, if you're doing teaching math, is there a reason why they need to do 40 math problems on a page if it's all the same concept? If they could show me that they knew it in five math problems, then we moved on, right? I mean,
Right.
and I would call them up to me one at a time or two at a time, and they would work some problems on a chalkboard and show me what, if they knew how to do it. And then that was it. And we'd move on, instead of um, sort of drill and kill,
Hmm. Yeah. Which again is a lot of, I mean, I remember those days where 50 math problems a night. It's just brutal. It
Yeah.
took so long. But I guess in a way it was effective. But again, I don't know what the flip side of it would have been,
But
if
see,
I
the
only had.
the key to that is you have to figure out who needs 50 problems on a page and who doesn't.
Hmm.
The way you figure that out is you do a check-in with them. And, if they come up to you and they can't do five problems that you just taught, then you have to spend more time with them. And then I would send home for homework, more for them to do at home to make sure they understood. But pretty much they got so that they could, once they understood the system, they could tell me what they knew, and they were pretty much spot on. Um, so
Interesting. Um, okay, next one is what kind of learning materials would the students be using?
Well, now I'm sure if I was teaching elementary school still, it'd be a lot more technology,
Hmm.
like because they could use Wix, and they could make
Right.
websites and things like that. They'd love that.
Hmm.
But back when I was doing it, it was more project based.
Okay.
They they'd build a game for other people to play about the concept, and they'd be like you and I'd be partners if we were kids, and we'd create this game on a game board, and then kids would move around and they'd play each other's games and that sort of thing, but um, mine was always creating something,
Hmm.
always. It was
Hmm.
never just sitting and answering problems. It was creating something.
Hmm. And that leads right into the next question, the last question, which is what would the assessment look like? So would that be a creation as well, or?
Yeah, the same. I did the same sort of thing where every kid came to me at the end of my teaching of a certain unit and or a concept, and they'd have to tell me what they knew. And within one or two questions, you can figure out whether they understand it or they don't,
Hmm.
rather than them taking a test.
Hmm.
So I had this system of it looked like my grade book looked like a stop sign. It was red, yellow, and green.
Hmm.
And if you immediately knew the concept from the very get-go, I'd color the square green. If you had to come to me for some help with it, then I'd put yellow. And then if
Hmm.
you really struggled with it, I'd put red. And so
Hmm.
then I would have the red students take this stuff home to work on it or work on it further in class. And I'd have the green students move on to, creating something else with the concept, so it was really a very cool thing. And then like when parents came for their conferences, I would lay out how many green, if your kid had green all the way across, your kid's doing an excellent job. If they had red all the way across, they're struggling.
Hmm.
It was all sort of color coded.
Hmm.
But I do believe an assessment one-on-one is much stronger than any assessment you can do where they write it out or they fill it out because um, I think that sort of boring, mundane attitude can actually hurt your performance. When you, like you said, 50 math problems on the page, if that was the assessment, it might not be done as well just because you're bored, versus if you meet with the teacher and the teacher asks you a few questions and you show that you understand and then you move on. Um,
Hmm.
Kids really appreciated that.
Got it. Thank you. Well, that was really helpful. I'll go ahead and stop the recording, but I do have a couple other questions for you.